sex is a thing for you like it's for everybody else. Just why
No,
is
I'm
that?
a proper kinky bitch. I am. I mean, I'm German. What do you expect? I actually got a lot of shit from disabled people, actually, and non-disabled people for being too negative. Because my campaign was essentially highlighting shops and stores that just weren't accessible. And I'm not even talking about having an accessible changing room. You just can't even get into it.
What's your level of empathy?
Depends how hot they are.
What's going on, people? Welcome to this week's episode of Jordan Jarrett-Bryan's The Coolest Disabled in the World. And yes, I have slowed that last bit down because it's important that you know I'm not talking about amongst a certain group or even a region, the world. I am the coolest disabled in the world. That's important for you guys to know that. You know it by now. This podcast, we invite amazing people who are doing or have done amazingly interesting things. Just have a really informal chat about those things and the role that disability has played, if indeed it has at all. And this week, in fact, before I get to my guests, I'm going to introduce the idea of subscribing early. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Slap, like I'm talking like Peggy Mitchell, like Kathy Bill. I'm talking Pat Butcher type slap on the subscribe button, whack it in the WhatsApp groups. You know what to do. We're looking for also suggestions of guests for future episodes. I've got guests booked up for the next 3 months, but I also want to hear from you guys. Who should I be speaking to? Let me know, please, in the comments. This week on the podcast, oh my God, I've got just bursting of fabulousness. I've got sass, I've got intelligence, I've got presence, I've got sexiness, I've got charisma, I've got the amazingly talented TV presenter, author, and public speaker, Sam Renke. Sam, good evening. How the bloody hell are you?
I'm bloody marvellous. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you very much. I'm really
Oh,
good. I'm
do
so
you
glad
know
you're here.
what? Oh, I'm so glad I'm here. But I did just say, like, this is way past my bedtime.
It is.
When you hit like 30, what am I now? 39. Like bedtime starts at 9 o'clock, right? That is it. And we are recording this a little bit late, so
Yeah.
you owe me big time,
Listen,
Mister.
it's all the love, and on
All,
that,
only for
I'm
you.
Oh, I love you too. And I'm going to bed early as well. Actually, these days, it definitely is an old age thing. But I'm up early. I'm up at 5:30 most mornings, so that kind of
Okay, evens it
balances it
out.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
well,
think so.
no,
I
do
think so.
you know what? Let's just say we peaked. That's the problem. We
Yeah,
were
yeah,
once
yeah.
really cool. I feel like we've just kind of peaked now, and it's just a gradual decline from here. But
When I
I'm fine with that.
when I first
I'm
met you,
fine
though,
with
you
that.
were a proper party girl. You were a raving girl. You were out
Oh
in all the
well,
gay bars and all the bars, pretty much in
how
London.
do you
You were a
know
raving
that? Have I
girl.
told you that?
Yeah, well, people have told me, and you told me as well. I've just said, I
Wait,
know.
which? Hang on, wait. Which people?
No, no one,
Is that why I
no one
don't
to be
get as
worried
much
about.
TV work? Is that what it is?
Not
It's
at
a
all.
rumor mill.
Listen, not in a bad way. Just Samantha's the party girl. No, she's the party girl, man. You wanna have a good
I
time.
I
Sam's a person to
was.
be with.
You
No
know
more,
what?
no.
I think from like the age of 26 to about 31, I was a real I just went a bit crazy. And I think actually because growing up, I had a really codependent relationship with my mom. And I think a lot of disabled people can completely sympathize and relate to that. You know, the
Totally.
world is quite scary. I often say, and I don't mean this in terms of, cognitive ability or just, a desire or want to be as successful as, our peers. But I think like for me, like disabled people or my experiences, I've always done things at least 5 to 7 years like behind because there's so many barriers and obstacles in those milestones, like the milestones like going on your first date, kind of driving. I appreciate it's not everyone's experience, but definitely when you have specific disabilities where you've got to wait for adaptations, you've got to save money for X, Y, and Z. I do feel like I was lagging behind, not in all elements of my life, but certainly
Mhm.
for some part of my life, like my peers were surpassing me. So
Sure.
when I quit my job, I qualified as a teacher, and then I was like, hell to the no. I'm just not going to do this anymore. I did that whole post grad of hell hell.
And
And
you were like,
then
no,
I did
no more.
teaching, no more. And then I was like, oh, I always tell people, I'm like, I just didn't really like kids. That's not the truth. It was a lot. And then I quit my job and I moved to London. And all of a sudden I was going from this very codependent relationship to living in, Shoreditch, which is very trendy, on my own. Essentially, I had one friend from back home, and I was like, wow, this is my dream. I will do anything to survive. And my survival was networking, and networking was just a fancy way of saying going out and partying and not remembering much for days on end. I'll tell you what, I met a lot of TV people there. I met a lot of music people there, and a lot of the opportunities that came my way in subsequent years absolutely came from partying and just network. And it wasn't all like partying; it was networking, and that was kind of before the Instagram days, and like Facebook was a thing. MySpace was absolutely a thing.
I totally understand what you mean in terms of that delayed, everything is behind everybody else. One question though, we ask all of our guests on this podcast, Sam, before we kind of get into it. We've got into it already, but I want to ask you, out of 10, what is your cool number?
Oh, I'm Infinity.
I'm infinity. I'm infinity. I mean, see, you're kind of messing with the whole premise of the podcast, Sammy, because I'm the coolest in the world, right? So therefore, you can't be.
Although we did say that we were going to get married in 2 years' time, didn't
We
we? So
did. I remember. I remember
our coolness will combine, and then we'll be fine.
an explosion of just like
An
just
explosion
cool
of coolness.
explosion. I love that. You are one third of a fantastic show on ITV that was happening last year, Unfiltered Women. Talk me through how you found that, Sam, but also
Mm,
in media is doing a lot of catching up. You used the word catch up word earlier on, catching
yeah.
up to try and ensure it's accessible and is inclusive for everyone with disabilities it can be. How did you find the planning around that with three women who were disabled? And just generally, how much did you enjoy the whole process of presenting that program?
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful show. So if you haven't watched it, ITVX Unfiltered Women with Fats Timbo and Jay Howard, and of course myself. It was wonderful on a personal note. It was the first thing that I hosted, so I was the lead for all three episodes, which is something that I am really proud of, and it's something that I really like to do. So that was a great personal win. I think it was great because it was, very organic. Only negative thing about it was they were too darn short. They were like 10 minutes an episode.
Yeah, they
And
were.
as you
Yeah.
can probably gauge, I can talk for Britain and then add two
Mhm.
other feisty females, and we can talk a lot. I think it was quite funny because, like, in the changing, the dressing room, they should have just filmed us all in the dressing room instead of like on set, because I think they could have probably got a lot better content, just like, being a fly on the wall. I think it's great. I hope that, these shows are not just produced because it was produced predominantly to celebrate Disability History Month, which is my
Mhm.
favourite celebration of all. So it's great that that was something that we earmarked and celebrated in a really beautiful current way. Um, but I feel like, again, like, three disabilities 365 days a year, like, so our storytelling, our culture, our history, our talent should be afforded 365 days of on-screen, you know um uh viewing. So I think that's the only thing. A lot of disabled people have reached out to me and sent me beautiful messages, but every single person has said, I just wish there were more. Every
Yeah.
single one. I just wish there were more. And that just goes to show that, any broadcaster or producer, whoever's listening, because I know they all are, Jordan. I know they're all big fans of yours.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Don't be worried about commissioning anything that is disability centric. I think that's also a fear. Like, we don't want to, there's this narrative about ostracizing other groups within society, and, oh, will it actually resonate with X, Y, and Z? And I think a lot of the storytelling that we talk about, yes, it can be quite disability centric, but ultimately we're talking about humans and human interactions and love and loss and difficulties and challenges and feelings of isolation, feelings of loneliness. All of that is a human experience, and I think disability is a human experience, and we that gets often diluted because we are still seen as them and us.
I hear that. And what I'm also really interested to know in terms of the progression of our industry and the understanding and the empathy shown in terms of being inclusive, what other things? So you're in a chair, you have disability brittle bones. I won't try and pronounce the technical
Go on, do
term.
it.
No, 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 no. I just, oh, this is really bad.
It's
Hang on,
fine,
hang
don't
on. Let
worry.
me. I'm rubbish. You say. What's the medical
Um,
condition? Good.
yeah, osteogenesis imperfecta.
There we go. And what I want to know is, do you sense that because you do a lot of TV? We were saying on Sunday we were in the same building and didn't realize it until I saw that you were
Yeah.
where I was sitting like 3 hours later on your Instagram stories. Um, do you sense that the TV industry is fully understanding the needs for people with different disabilities, and are they still making errors but trying? Have they kind of cracked it? And you feel when you from when you leave your house to when you get back home, do you feel like every element of thinking about what you need to do your job to the best of your ability is being considered now?
No.
Okay,
No, I
great.
don't think, I think there's still gaping holes, and I think that's because we still don't have enough disabled people, deaf disabled and neurodivergent people, in internal roles. I know that there's been, I feel really bad saying this because, there's obviously been positive change because you and I, and so many others have success stories. But I still think when I talk about disability and removing barriers, I talk about it in a holistic way. Like, those barriers don't just happen when I'm sat in a studio, and I need to think they start from the moment that I wake up.
Okay.
I deliver a lot of D&I training, and I often refer to like a disabling world and removing those barriers. And I talk about looking at it in a holistic way. And how I describe that is, if you need a support person, is that support person going to turn up so that you can get to work on time? The likelihood is they might not, because care work is undervalued or underpaid. There's a huge turnover. But even when we're looking at our own kind of individual needs, sometimes if I have like a pain spike, I might have to take some medication at night. And what does that mean? The impact of that is, I may wake up a little bit later, or it takes me a little bit longer because I'm still a little bit wobbly after that medication, which means that I would have to maybe request that I come into work a little bit later. So I think, again, all these little hurdles are often not, explored. I know when I did the Malteser advert, a prime example, and I appreciate, it was in 2016. Well, I've had similar stories since. I went to that audition and it was looking for disabled talent. The studio wasn't accessible. It had a step. The toilet wasn't accessible. I was there for about 8 hours. I couldn't go to the toilet. I had to ask someone, a stranger on the street, to help me get into the building. All the time that I was actually there, not only was I worried about, oh my goodness, am I going to remember my lines? Am I going to perform well? Am I going to make a good impression? All the things that any actor would have to think about. On top of that, I was like, I need a pee, can't have a drink, my mouth is dry. Who's going to help me get out of the building? What if the person who helps me get out of the building tips me out of my wheelchair? What if I end up in hospital? Like, I appreciate to some people that might sound like, oh, don't worry about things until they happen. But I guess when you're disabled, particularly when you've got a condition like brittle bones, my life is risk assessing. I've got to risk assess everything. I've got, it's a bit like plan for the worst, and then you won't ever be disappointed.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so So I think there's still a long
But
way to go,
on
and
that, Sam, sorry, but on that, and
yeah,
that reality that you've described is your reality. But having to
yeah,
set the bar low so you don't have to ever be really upset is really that's not a way to live.
yeah,
That's just not. You shouldn't
yeah,
have to. We shouldn't
absolutely,
have to live that way because it's not. You don't want to live expecting the worst always because I won't be upset. That's not cool.
yeah.
That's not
Right. I
cool.
mean, even recently, and I don't want to say what show or anything like that or what broadcaster, because I've moved out of London and I moved for a number of reasons. Because in London, well, across the country, only 9% of homes meet any access requirements, and I couldn't privately rent in London because even if I had the money to privately rent, the landlords would not allow me to do adaptations because it's deemed as devaluing the property. So I was in a housing association, and only because I was in a housing association was I then allowed to get adaptations done to my home.
Mm,
And I remember, even though I was in a nice location, I sat there and it was a very, very small apartment. I'm a manual chair user, but I started also using a power chair. And I could barely get the power chair, I couldn't turn around in my kitchen in the power chair. It just wasn't fit for purpose. And I sat there
mm,
one day, and not to sound ungrateful, I was like, is this it? Is this my life? Is this what I shouldn't, my home should, um, you know, liberate me, not confine me. And I felt confined. So I moved back to Lancashire. I had an opportunity to take over a family property, which again is very. I'm not even going to say very privileged. It's because my dad died when I was 9 that I have this property. We have this property, so it's not exactly a win-win situation. But I have this property, and I've been able to adapt it, and it's bigger and it suits my needs. But it's really interesting. As soon as I moved out of London, some of the shows and things that I worked on then didn't want to cover travel expenses for me. And I was like, well, you don't understand. Like, disabled people do not have the luxury to live where they want. Sometimes they have to move in with parents. Sometimes they have to move into residential care, which might be across the country, but they still want to
hmm
work. They still want to
Yeah,
work, but you don't have
yeah.
the budget to cover their travel
hmm
or cover the
hmm
travel of their support assistant. I know there's schemes like access to work and so on and so forth, but let's face it, sometimes these schemes take months and months and months or aren't fit for purpose. Whereas you've got big broadcasters who say that they're, reaching quotas and they've got this pot of X, Y, and Z, but they haven't thought about, again, that holistic view of disability. Great, we can get Samantha in the building. Yeah, we can remove a sofa from the studio so she can put a wheelchair there. But actually, how is she getting there? Has she got the
Yeah.
right support in place? Is there anything we can actually do?
And do you feel like, Sam, when you hear broadcasters talking about progress being made and we're doing this and we've got that, you just look at them with like just smiling, but inside you're like, I've heard this before, and my
Yeah.
reality isn't what you're saying.
I mean, I have the same conversations over and over again, which is quite sad. I really do. And even even when I post something on social media, particularly when I talk about like disableism or ableism, and I'll get people and they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't even think about that." And I'm like, "Wow, I feel like I've spoken about this 100 times, and it's only just maybe clicked with you." And that's not a I'm not like giving anyone a hard time. I get it. If that's not your day to day, I understand. I don't know what it's like to be a parent. I don't know what it's like to have a snotty child. Like sometimes, if my when my sister
Most children
moans
are
about my
snotty, to be
niece,
fair.
yeah, exactly. When my sister moans about her kids, and I go, oh God, yeah, I didn't think you have to. So I get it, but it still doesn't help remove those barriers. I think we still have a long way to go, and at one point I feel like disabled people weren't allowed to criticize. And I actually experienced this when I launched my campaign, Don't Want Our Cash, which essentially highlighted how inaccessible the high street was and how, brands didn't recognise and honour the purple pound. I actually got a lot of shit from disabled people, actually, and non disabled people for being too negative because my campaign was essentially highlighting shops and stores that just weren't accessible. And I'm not even talking about having an accessible changing room, just can't even get into it, right? And some disabled people are like, don't rock the boat, that they're trying to make an effort, as in them, as in the pre-disabled
Sure.
world, are trying to make an effort, and then people who are supposed to be allies were like, well, we've done this, and we've got someone on, Strictly Come Dancing and who's got a limb difference. What more do you want? It really felt like that. It kind of still does a little bit. Like we don't, I often say like leave your egos at the door. For
Mm.
you to be a good ally, you need to leave your ego at the door because we are all privy to unconscious bias, irrespective of who we are.
Before I want to ask you to talk to you about young Sam, right, and growing up. I'm really interested because I only know this Sam. I've known you for at least 10 years. I'm really interested to know what Sam. And you're very confident. You're very outward going. You're a fighter, and that's why I resonate with you. And you're a great laugh as well. Before I ask you about young Sam, did you get like an endless supply of Maltesers for life when you did that
Oh
advert?
my god, why does everyone want to know about that? No.
No, you didn't. Okay.
No, do you know what? When some people go like, "Did they pay you in Maltesers?" and I go, "No, they paid me a shitload of money," and like
No,
people are
no,
like,
no,
"Oh," people are like,
no. That
"Oh,"
what the
and I'm
chocolates
like, but you do know I can buy chocolate with the money.
with the money. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. What was growing up in Lancashire like for you, Sam? What was it? What was your childhood like? What was school like? What was
Yeah.
the vision for the kind of woman you wanted to become?
So I was born in Germany. I moved over to the UK when I was little. I went to what we would deem as a special school to begin with, and then they realised that I just wasn't thriving. I just sat there and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I have a physical disability, and they put me in a room with a lot of children that had intellectual or learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and I really struggled because even though we were all on this umbrella term of disability, I couldn't connect with them on many levels because a lot of them were non-verbal, and I really struggled, and I think that really impacted my identity. And for a long time, I rejected other disabled people because I felt like I was forced to be around people with the same label as me. Luckily, that changed in 2010 when I became a trustee for the Brittle Bone Society, and then all of a sudden I was exposed to so many wonderful and amazing diverse disabled people. And I was like, oh my God, well, I've been missing you all my life. But for a very long time, I rejected any notion of kind of, it wasn't even about my identity. It was like, why should I be with these people who, just because we've got the same label, doesn't mean that we're going to be best friends? And you can experience that with race or
Hmm.
kind of sexual orientation. It's like, well, you
Gender,
stay with
yeah,
your group, and it
yeah.
doesn't work like that. You get on with people because you have a connection. Yes, there may be some shared experiences. So I really struggle with that. And then I think age 4 they recognised that I wouldn't flourish in a quote unquote special school, so they put me in mainstream. And I remember the first day I went, and all the kids were quite hesitant. I was definitely the only wheelchair kid. And I just remember them all going onto the field, the summer field, and they all picked daisies from the ground. And instead of talking to me, they all came up to me and they put on my footplate of my wheelchair, they all put a daisy. So like all these school kids
Oh,
like put little daisy, and then they recognised that I was pretty cool and loud, and then absolutely amazing. I think when we look at disability and we look at the inspiration tragedy narrative, you think that any tragedy in a disabled person's life is completely linked to their condition or their diagnosis. But as I mentioned earlier, my childhood was taken away from me because my dad suddenly died of a brain hemorrhage, and me and my mum found him in the bathroom, and after he died, we had to turn off the life support, and it was horrendous. And my mum did not cope, and she went on a spiral. And I'm not here to tell her story, but horrific things happened with my mum, and my sister went off the rails, and I struggled with being we were immigrating to America. We had our house up for sale. We were emigrating to America, and then we were going to settle in New Zealand because we have family there. And then all of a sudden he died, and the school that my sister was at said that they didn't want to accommodate my needs. So not only was I
wow.
not in a school with my sister, I went to a different school, and I struggled. I really struggled with life. up until college. Like high school was hell. I struggled with a lot of things, but most of it was to do with my home life. Most of it was to do with trauma. Most of it is to do with loss, rather than actually having the disability was just a cherry on top of the icing. And I kind of always share that with people because I want them to know that, yeah, disability can be challenging because we live in a world that isn't created for us. But actually, what makes us human is other things that have happened in our life. And actually, my biggest tragedy is losing a parent aged 9. I've had 200 fractures in my life. Like nothing pales in that pales into insignificance in comparison with having your whole family turned upside down, and everything, going from this very close knit family to a family that was absolutely broken on so many levels. That was deep, wasn't it? Sorry about that. I should have done
No,
a
no, no,
trigger
no, no,
warning there.
no. It wasn't. It's really interesting. 'Cause I'm trying to get to know you, Sam, because I just see the presenting Sam. I just see the kind of when we catch up and we have a laugh, Sam. So it's interesting to kind of understand the Samantha that grew up and what shaped you. And on that point, has your family, the upbringing that you had, and what happened when you were young, which you described, has that in any way shaped about having your own family? And I read an article that it was in the Metro a
Mm,
few years back now, where you spoke very openly about the kind of perceptions placed upon you and your ability to have,
mm,
children and have a family. Has the family that you had and then lost in many ways when you were younger shaped how you feel about having your own family? Is there any link there at
mm.
all?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'd be an amazing mother. The older that I get, it's really interesting because, I there's a bit of a blocker when it comes to motherhood. I know a lot of people who've got my condition who are parents who, have children, whether that's through IVF or, naturally with intervention. So I know that it is a possibility for me. But I think, growing up, that was never discussed with me properly. I think there was a real fear around, the idea of me becoming a mother, and that hurt for a very long time because how I saw that was my family saying, "You can't cope. You can't cope. You struggle to do things yourself. How are you going to cope being a mother?" But I actually, as I've gotten a little bit older, I've stepped back and I actually don't see that that's the fear. I think the fear is, my mom and my sister and other relatives understanding how challenging the world can be and how, we don't have the best welfare system to support disabled people. There's so many barriers already. Like I think the concern was not only for on a health level, like can my body support that? Because there's always a higher risk when you have a disability. That's just the way it is. So I've kind of let go of like feeling like people are, they don't have respect for me, or they don't see my value or my worth. I've kind of stepped away from that. But I also, I don't know whether you're the same. Like as you get a little bit older, even though I think I'd be an amazing parent, there's part of me now where I'm like, I just want an easy life. Like
Mm.
you've got to make this distinction. Do I think if I got pregnant tomorrow and became a mother, would I cope? Yes, because I cope with everything in my life. That's not, but I've got to a point in my life now where I'm like, but do I want to just be coping? Do I want to just be surviving? Do I want to just be every day just about hitting that milestone? Because I tell you what, even in my own life without, with 2 cats, sometimes with 2 cats, when I'm under the weather and I don't have the right support in place, even looking after them 2 creatures, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. And I think that isn't a disability thing. I think it's maybe an age thing, you know? But
Sure.
I think I wish we saw more positive imagery of disabled parents. I wish growing up I saw pregnant disabled people. I wish I saw healthy relationships. I wish when I go on a dating app I see, interable couples, on their advertisements. I wish that would change culture. Because in my book I write a chapter on dating, and I reflect on, who I've been for people. And, I've been a one night stand, I've been, someone's mistress, I've been like a dirty little secret for somebody, I've been all these things, but I've never really been someone who someone can go, I'm fucking proud of this. This is my woman. This is, that. And I think there's so much surrounding dating, and particularly now in this kind of really throwaway, swipe next society. I think disabled people really struggle with dating. I think it is something, and that makes me sad because I know that I'm really content on my own. Like, I really love my own company.
You're so open about the things that everybody else talks about, right? And dating and relationships and sex is one of those things. And people will have preconceived ideas, Samantha, as you well know, about what somebody with one arm or in a wheelchair can do, or someone
Yeah.
with CP, whatever it may be. What are some of those perceptions that you've heard placed upon you? And explain why those perceptions are just bullshit, really. You have a
Yeah.
thriving, I don't know about now, but thriving dating life. Sex is a thing for you, like it's for everybody else. Just why
No,
is
I'm
that
a, I'm a
that
proper
perception
kinky
nonsense?
bitch. I am. I mean, I'm German. What do you expect? Like, I've got some like right. I mean, people. So, like, some of the guys I'm talking to, they're like, "Wow, that's a lot." I'm like, "Oh my god, is it really? Oh, it's not everyone else like me." So yeah, and do you know what? Talking about sex and relationships is a journey for me as well. When I started my career in kind of journalism and broadcast, I don't know what it was. It was kind of, I don't know. It was the Paralympics, so the 2012 Paralympics, which was a real turning point. And I was just inundated with journalists, asking me for interviews, and it was always about sex. And it was so sensationalist, and it was so voyeuristic. It was so like, I remember getting like I'm not going to say which again magazine it was, but I got like a
Mm,
list of about 20 questions about sex and disability, and there was nothing in my eyes. There was nothing educational about it. It was really crass things like, how do you masturbate? Do you have sex in your wheelchair? I was like, this is to add to someone's kink. Like,
mm,
I don't want people reading this newspaper on their way to work and being like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom to relieve myself. That's not empowering for anybody.
mm-hmm.
So I really rejected kind of speaking openly about sex and disability because I didn't feel like I had the control. It was always sensationalized. And then just before the pandemic, I survived a sexual assault, and I started getting therapy for that and kind of building up my confidence again with the opposite sex and my own body. And now I feel like I'm at a turning point where I have reconnected with myself. I actually feel empowered when I talk about sex and disability. But going back to your question, I think there's, particularly for disabled women, there's this kind of onus put on them that you're either not a real woman if you can't bear a child. I felt that a lot. I felt very dismissed by men because they thought, firstly, I couldn't have sex. And I saw it, when I was going out with my girlfriends. We're all good-looking girls, and I would never get the guy. On the odd occasion, it was really weird as well. The odd occasion that I would pull in a club, my friends all of a sudden were like, "We're going now." Right, really, because it was.
Oh,
I think it
really?
made. I think it actually made them feel uncomfortable that I was like getting, making out with a guy on the dance floor, and he was on his knees in the dance floor making out with a girl in the wheelchair. I found that really interesting, and that again added to that layer of shame around my own sexual desires. So there was a lot going on there, and even just whenever I talk about my sexual assault, people straight away go, "Did you report it?" And I find that really victim blaming as well, if you will, because I'm like, no, I didn't report it. And do you know why? I didn't want to have two police officers who probably are ableist, probably, joke about, have got like, weird memes with, disabled people, or, like just the really crass things. Because I've been preyed upon by weird predators in the past because they've got a fetish. Just because you're in law enforcement doesn't mean that you don't take the mickey out of certain people. Look at Sarah Everard and look at the text messages and all that came about with that.
Mm,
So I was like, no, I've even had someone say, well, who would want to f a disabled person. If that is someone's opinion and multiple people's opinion that we are not sexually attractive, can you imagine going, well, now I've faced a sexual assault?
Hmm.
You know, it's so
Hmm.
intimidating. I mean, conviction rates for any woman is very low when you're reporting SA. Never mind when you've got all the different layers of having, kind of a disability added to it. But I also want to empower women as well now to be like, it's okay not to be having sex. For a very long time, I felt excluded again from my peers because when they were talking about dating and when they were talking about sex, and I didn't have a story to share. So when I moved to London, I went through a phase of being quite promiscuous, but promiscuous in the sense of having any sexual interaction that would come my way, and that meant that I would always be drunk when I was having sex. To a point where sometimes I wouldn't remember. I would have sex with people I didn't find attractive, didn't feel safe with, but the adrenaline that I got from talking about it with my friends the next day, because I mean, even now, it's really strange, isn't it? Even now, because I've kind of like rekindled my libido again. It is interesting. Like people are interested. I've had more chats recently about my little fling that I had the other day, and people are like, oh, and all of a sudden you're exposed to this little group because everyone's doing it. And
Hmm.
I want to remind disabled people that I get that, I hear that, but don't. It's not worth putting yourself in a position where someone can take advantage, or you don't feel safe, or even just don't bloody like the person. I
Yes.
wish that
Yeah.
someone would have. I wish someone would have validated me and said, you know what, you're still amazing, even if you aren't having sex.
And just finally on this, where are you on the barometer of hope of finding a partner that loves and respects you and doesn't see your disability? Or actually, as I asked that question, do you want your partner to see your disability?
I think talk a lot about fetish and the reasons why I struggle with, being. I can never say the word fetishize. Yeah.
Fetishized. Yes. Yeah.
Um, and it's all to do with consent. So yes, I want my partner to see my disability because if we're gonna be going on holiday to Barbados, he's gonna have to make sure he's booked an accessible, hotel room. So yes, on that level, but also I think it's I don't want to kink shame anybody because it is what it is. We've all got our fetishes in one way or shape or form, I guess. But for me, whenever I've been fetishized, I've never been privy to that. I've always entered it into that intimacy and felt like this is something genuine. And then I found out that they just wanted to tick a box, you know?
Hmm.
So if I would have known, if the transparency would have been there with a relationship, go, do you know what? I've never had sex with a petite person. I really want to do it, or someone in a wheelchair. That's something I really want to do. I'd be like, that's up to you, but I'm not that person for you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
best of
Yeah.
luck. See you later.
Yeah.
I think dating is really difficult. I am not very proactive. It's the one thing in my life that I'm not very proactive with.
Okay.
But I'm so kind of just comfortable with who I am that I want, it's I don't feel that need to be completed by another person. Someone needs to compliment me, and if that person compliments me, then absolutely. But it's not like I've given up hope or anything like that. But I don't feel a need. But it goes back, as I was saying earlier, take the disability out of the equation. When my dad died, my mum got into some not great relationships, and it became apparent that a lot of women in my life growing up, they needed that validation from a man. They
Hmm.
felt like they couldn't survive, and I grew up in a household going, what are you talking about? You're amazing on your own. Why do you need a man? You know? So I've worked so hard on loving myself that, anyone that comes into my life now needs to set the bar high, but also compliment me. Like I don't need you. I don't need you, but
Hmm.
I want to share my life with you.
Well, before we wrap it, I'll ask my final question, Sam. I want to just personally say I definitely appreciate you being honest about some of those subjects, because I appreciate some of those things are very difficult to talk about. Some of those things are very could be very triggering, and I know you to be a very strong, confident, outwardly caring and loving person, Sam. But even so, you're not a brick wall. You have feelings. So I
No.
just want to say that I appreciate that honesty
Oh, thank you.
from your experiences. So no, thank you, thank you. I want you to recognize that. I recognize that wouldn't have been easy to discuss. Um, to lighten the mood a little bit, our final question that we ask every guest as well is, what's the stupidest question somebody's asked you in regards to your disability?
Oh, oh my days! You could have asked. You should pre-warned me of this because I probably
Sorry,
have a
yes, I should.
bazillion.
I should.
Um.
Or something that you've just heard, someone else was asked, that you just thought, really?
Oh my god, it's so difficult. There's so many. I mean, there's a lot about sex and relationship, isn't there? But
Of course.
I did one TV show once, and one of the panelists didn't get on with this person. Not polar opposite politically to me, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And I mentioned I lived on my own, and she tilted her head and she went, "Do you live on your own?" So that was fun.
I mean,
This is this is this is the person that I was supposed to do a whole show with.
we've had some absolute shockers from some people about things that have been said, and it's just been, some stuff is just like,
Yeah.
just very briefly, what's your level of empathy when someone asks you a question? On the face of it, it seems quite thick and stupid, but could actually just be something they just genuinely don't know. Do you give them a look of like, you stupid idiot, don't talk to me ever again? Or is it a
Um,
fair enough?
Depends how hot they are.
Okay. Fair enough. That's fair enough. If they're fit, they get a pass. Is that what you say, Sam?
Yeah, I'm like, come with me. Let me educate you.
Yeah. Over a drink. Let's go around the corner and have a
Yeah,
drink. And
come back to mine.
yeah. Listen, Sam, you said at the start that you were infinity in terms of your coolness number.
Yes,
I'm not going to argue with you on that at all, because honestly,
darn straight.
I think you're dope. Not only are you hilarious and good vibes, you're highly intelligent, you're highly talented, and you've got so much to offer. And I'm really, really glad that you're fighting the fight, not only for yourself, but for everybody that's coming behind you as well. And your energy, your passion. I feel like a bit of a Jerry Springer speech after his show now. But
I know,
honestly,
right?
I wanted to let you know how amazing that you are. I'm very grateful for you coming on the show today. And please keep pushing, keep fighting, and keep snogging, because life is too short. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah,
Oh my
have your
god,
fun.
I'm like all for that. I've got my mojo back now. I'm like a
Good.
wild beast.
Peace. Men, watch out. Watch out.
Men, watch
And on
out.
and on that note, don't forget to subscribe, give it a slap in the WhatsApp groups, give us a comment. You know what to do by now. Until next time. Peace.